Snow in the southeast, a pattern shift that could bring accumulating snow to areas from Georgia through the Carolinas and into Virginia. That is what we are tracking for this weekend. Let me walk you through exactly what the models are showing, where the best chances for snow are setting up, and what you need to know if you are in the potential impact zone. Right now, conditions across the southeast couldn't be more different from what's coming. South Carolina has been dealing with rainy days and near record warmth. Central Georgia has seen similar conditions. Meanwhile, up in the mountains of Virginia and West Virginia, temperatures have already dropped into the 20s and 30s. That contrast is about to compress rapidly as Arctic air pushes south over the next 48 to 72 hours. Let's talk about what the models are showing, because this is where it gets interesting, and frankly, this is where the uncertainty lies. The European model, which has been one of the more reliable models this winter, is showing precipitation primarily impacting the coastal areas. Eastern North Carolina, parts of eastern South Carolina, and areas along the coast are favored for the heaviest precipitation. The cold air on the European solution would support snow accumulation for inland areas, but the bulk of the moisture stays east. The GFS model tells a different story. It's more aggressive with moisture pushing further inland. On the GFS solution, areas from Columbia, South Carolina through the Piedmont of North Carolina into southern Virginia would see accumulating snow. Some runs have been showing 2 to 4 inches for places that rarely see that kind of snowfall. Then there's the NAM model, which came in this morning looking like something out of the 1980s. The NAM is notorious for being aggressive with snowfall in the southeast, and today's runs were no exception. It is showing a more amplified system that would bring significant snow to places like Charlotte, Raleigh, and even into central Georgia. Now, before anyone gets too excited or too disappointed, let me be clear about what this means. We're still roughly 48 hours out from the main event. At this range, models can and do change significantly. I've seen setups that looked this promising completely fall apart in the final 24 hours. I've also seen setups that looked marginal come together at the last minute and overperform. You may remember January of last year. The models were struggling right up until the day before, and then the system came together and dropped significant snow across the deep south. Places that were forecast for a dusting ended up with 6 to 10 inches. That's the nature of forecasting snow in the southeast. The margin for error is razor thin. A shift of 50 miles in track makes the difference between a foot of snow and cold rain. Here's what we know with high confidence. A low pressure system will develop along the Gulf Coast and track northeast. Cold air will be in place across the region by Saturday night. The question is how these two ingredients interact. For snow to accumulate in places like Columbia, Charlotte, or Raleigh, several things need to happen. The low needs to track close enough to bring moisture inland. The cold air needs to hold strong enough at the surface to support snow rather than a rain and snow mix. And the timing needs to work out so the heaviest precipitation falls when temperatures are coldest. The European model suggests the low tracks too far east for significant inland snow. The GFS and NAM suggest a track that would be more favorable. Looking at the upper level pattern, there's support for the more inland solution. The trough digging into the southeast is negatively tilted, which typically means a more organized, stronger system. That is a good sign for those hoping for snow. Let me break this down by region so you know what to expect in your area. Starting in the deep south, Georgia, Alabama, the Florida Panhandle. If you are in this region, you are looking at the coldest air of the season arriving by Saturday. Wind chills in the 20s and 30s for most areas. Northern Georgia into the Atlanta metro could see some flurries or light snow showers, but significant accumulation looks unlikely at this point. The moisture axis is setting up too far east for South Carolina. The Upstate, places like Greenville and Spartanburg, you are right on the edge. The current consensus suggests a rain to snow transition overnight Sunday into Monday morning. Accumulation potential exists, but is highly dependent on timing. If the cold air wins the race, you could see a couple inches. If the warm air hangs on longer, it's wet snow that struggles to accumulate. The Midlands around Columbia, you've got a better shot. Models are showing the cold air arriving before the heaviest precipitation. If that holds, 2 to 4 inches is within the realm of possibility. I know Columbia hasn't seen significant snow in years, but this setup has potential. The PD region and eastern South Carolina. You are in the sweet spot on several model solutions. Florence, Myrtle Beach, areas along the coast could see significant snow if the European model underdoes the inland extent. The cold air will be there, the moisture will be there. It's a matter of how they time up. For North Carolina, this is where it gets complicated, as it always does in North Carolina. The mountains in western North Carolina have been oddly quiet this winter. Asheville hasn't seen significant snow in several winters. This system doesn't look like the one to break that streak. The moisture stays too far east. The Piedmont from Charlotte through Greensboro to Raleigh, you are in the zone of highest uncertainty. The GFS would give you a respectable snowfall. The European keeps you mostly rain with a changeover at the end. The truth is probably somewhere in between. Eastern North Carolina, you've got good potential. The models generally agree that eastern sections see accumulating snow. Fayetteville, Jacksonville, Wilmington, this is your chance. For Virginia, the Shenandoah Valley, Richmond, Tidewater, you on the northern edge of this system. Cold air is not the issue for you. The question is whether enough moisture reaches your area. Current thinking suggests light to moderate snow is possible, with better chances the further south you are. Now let me address something I know many of you are thinking. You've seen setups like this before. You've gotten your hopes up before, and you've been disappointed before. I get it. Forecasting snow in the southeast is one of the most challenging things in meteorology. The models struggle with these systems because the margin is so tight. A degree or two in temperature makes all the difference. A shift of 50 miles in the storm track changes everything. But here's what I want you to take away from this. The pattern is there. The ingredients are there. Whether they come together perfectly for your specific location is something we want to know for certain until it happens. What I can tell you is this. If you are in the Carolinas or Virginia and you want to see snow, keep watching. Don't give up on this system yet. And don't get too locked in on any single model solution. The overnight model runs tonight will be important. If the European comes north with its precipitation axis, that is a good sign for inland areas. If the GFS holds steady or even trends a bit further east, that would increase confidence. Let me give you some practical guidance regardless of what happens with the snow. First, the cold. This is going to be the coldest air of the season for much of the southeast. Even if you don't get snow, you're going to feel this. Wind chills in the 20s are possible as far south as central Florida. If you are in Georgia or the Carolinas, you're looking at wind chills in the teens in some areas. Protect your pipes. If you in areas that don't normally see extended cold, this is not a drill. Dripping faucets. Opening cabinet doors under sinks. These simple steps can save you from expensive repairs. For those in areas where snow is possible, the usual preparations apply. Make sure you have food and essentials before Sunday. If we do get accumulating snow, roads will be impacted. Southeastern cities don't have the equipment or the experience to handle snow like northern cities do. What would be a minor inconvenience in Chicago or Minneapolis shuts things down in Charlotte or Columbia. If you don't need to be on the road Sunday night through Monday morning, stay home. Let the crews do their work. Give the sun a chance to do its thing Monday afternoon. For elderly family members or neighbors, check in on them. Make sure they have heat. Make sure they have food. Make sure they have medications. This is when community matters. One more thing about this pattern, even if this system underperforms, the overall setup suggests we not done. February is looking active. The pattern that bringing this cold air south is established and persistent. We could see additional chances in the coming weeks. So if this one disappoints you, don't lose hope. The winter isn't over. And frankly, patterns like this one tend to produce multiple events, not just one. I'll have updated information as the models come in tonight and tomorrow. The morning runs will be particularly important. By tomorrow evening, we should have a much clearer picture of what's going to happen. For now, here's my best estimate of what to expect, keeping in mind that this could change. Highest confidence for accumulating snow, eastern North Carolina, eastern South Carolina, southeastern Virginia. These areas have the best combination of cold air and moisture on most model solutions. Moderate confidence, the Midlands of South Carolina, the PD region, the North Carolina Piedmont. These areas could see anywhere from a dusting to several inches depending on storm track and timing. Lower confidence but not zero. Upstate South Carolina, the Charlotte Metro, central Virginia. You are on the edge. It could work out. It might not. Keep watching. Unlikely for significant snow. The Atlanta Metro, the mountains of North Carolina, most of Tennessee and Alabama. The moisture axis sets up too far east for these areas to see much. That's where we stand as of this evening. The models will run again overnight. I'll be watching closely. and I'll have an update for you tomorrow with the latest information. Stay warm, stay safe. And if you are one of those people who's been waiting for snow in the southeast, keep that hope alive. This pattern has potential. We just need the pieces to come together. Before I go, let me add some historical context that might help frame what we are looking at. January snowstorms in the southeast are not unprecedented, but they are memorable when they happen. Many of you remember the storm back in January of 2000 when parts of North Carolina saw nearly 2.5 feet of snow. The day before that storm, forecasters were calling for a dusting. The models completely underestimated what was coming. That's the nature of southeast snow. When the ingredients come together just right, these systems can overperform in a hurry. The dynamic cooling from falling precipitation, the wraparound moisture on the backside of the low, the interaction between the cold air and the developing storm. All of these factors can amplify snowfall beyond what the models initially show. On the flip side, I've also seen countless setups that looked promising fall apart at the last minute. The warm air wins the race. The moisture stays offshore. The system tracks just far enough east to leave inland areas with cold rain instead of snow. That's why I try to be measured in my analysis. I want you to have realistic expectations, but I also don't want you to give up hope prematurely. Looking at the teleconnection indices and the overall pattern, we are seeing some features that favor snow in the southeast. The Arctic oscillation has been negative, which typically means cold air can push further south than usual. The pattern over the Pacific has been supporting active weather across the southern tier of the country. These are the kinds of large-scale features that set the stage for events like this. They don't guarantee snow for any specific location, but they create the environment where snow becomes possible. For those of you who are newer to following weather, let me explain why southeast snow is so difficult to forecast. In the northern states, cold air is usually a given during winter. The main question is whether a system will bring moisture. In the southeast, both ingredients are in question. You need cold air to push south far enough to affect your area. You need moisture to arrive from the Gulf or the Atlantic. And you need these two things to time up perfectly. The atmosphere is a three-dimensional system. Cold air at the surface doesn't mean cold air aloft. Warm air aloft can melt snow before it reaches the ground. That's why you sometimes see temperatures at 32 degrees, but rain instead of snow. The column above you determines what reaches the surface. This weekend S system has the cold air arriving first, which is a good sign. When the cold air is already in place and precipitation moves in, you have a much better chance of seeing snow stick. When precipitation arrives first and cold air tries to push in behind it, the warm rain often wins. The models are showing the cold front pushing through Saturday into Saturday night. By Sunday morning, temperatures across much of the Carolinas will be in the 20s. That's cold enough to support snow. The question is where the moisture sets up and how much reaches inland areas versus staying along the coast. I mentioned the NAM model earlier, showing a more aggressive solution. Let me explain why the NAM behaves differently from the GFS and European models. The NAM, which stands for North American Mesoscale, runs at higher resolution than the global models. It can capture smaller scale features that the GFS and European miss. However, that higher resolution also means it can overdevelop systems and show snowfall amounts that don't verify. In the southeast, the NAM has a reputation for being bullish on snow. It often shows more snow than we actually get. But occasionally, especially when the setup is favorable, the NAM is the one that gets it right, while the global models underperform. That's why I look at all the models and try to find where they agree and where they disagree. When all the models point in the same direction, confidence is high. When they re-spread out like they are with this system, we have to wait for more data before committing to a specific forecast. The overnight model runs tonight will incorporate the latest observations from weather balloons, satellites, and surface stations. Each new run gives the models fresh information to work with. Sometimes that new data brings the models into better agreement. Sometimes it makes them diverge even more. By tomorrow morning, we'll have a clearer picture. And by tomorrow evening, with less than 24 hours until the system arrives, the models should be converging on a solution. For now, my advice is simple. Hope for the best, prepare for the cold regardless, and don't make any assumptions until we see how this plays out. The southeast deserves a good snow every now and then. Whether this is the one remains to be seen, but the potential is there, and that's more than we can say for most January setups. I'll see you in the morning with the updated forecast. Take care of your